The Great Reset is the way that the global elites are going to usher in 21st century socialism. We're going to talk about that on this segment of Stopping Socialism TV. But before we do, I have to say that Google and Facebook and YouTube, they are not doing us any favors when it comes to getting this type of anti-socialism content out there. So you can help us out by just doing a couple of things: like this video, share this video, and probably most importantly, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Stopping Socialism TV. You can really help us kind of break through the filters there. But Justin, enough of that. Let's talk about the Great Reset. I think we should just kind of start from square one, because this was something that we just started putting the puzzle pieces together. So let's just kind of start with how this even got on our radar. So I recall you calling me up in the middle of a work day and just be like, "Hey, I've been looking into some of this stuff. So take us."
So it's pretty much like every work day then.
That's a good point.
So look, I think this came about in May, if I remember right, May 2020. I stumbled across an article that talked about these global elites planning this meeting in early June to call for a great reset of the world economy using COVID-19, the pandemic, which at that time, remember, was a not that it's not a massive story now, but it was everything. That was the only thing people were talking about at that time. And it just, the quotes from the story, and I think it was either from The Guardian or from Daily Mail. It was a UK-based publication this article that I stumbled across. And when I saw the quotes just advertising this event, this virtual event that they were going to have, hosted by the World Economic Forum, which is the organization that runs that big annual meeting in Davos every year. I think they usually do it in January, I think. That really struck me as incredible. The quotes are just remarkable. They're talking just out in front, people like Prince Charles here and other global leaders, openly calling for a total destruction of the existing economic order and a completely new economic order. That's where they get the Great Reset. That's not me coming up with that. That's not you. That's what they call it. They branded it the Great Reset. They created a website dedicated entirely toward just this one idea, toward promoting this Great Reset, a Great Reset, pushing the reset button on the global economic system. And so that really piqued my interest, because how could it not, right? I mean, we're focused on socialism, and this was all about resetting global capitalism. And the quotes were just too incredible. And I could not believe the fact that no one was really talking about it. I mean, nobody on the right was talking about it. There were some people on the left talking about it, but the really influential people were constantly talking about it. They had all these quotes and people planning to go to this meeting, and that's what sparked my interest. Then they had the meeting, and then the quotes that came out of the meeting were even more incredible than the quotes going into the meeting. I thought, oh my God, like, these people are openly talking about a new world order, literally using those words in some case. I mean, it was incredible stuff.
Yeah, and just kind of for further context, I think somebody might read that article and just be like, "Oh, wow, that's, these people are crazy," and moving on. But Justin and I, we're so predisposed to looking for this type of stuff. I mean, I think the week prior to you talking to me about that, we were already starting to outline what a book that we could be doing about 21st century socialism. Because one of the things, if you were to listen to any of our videos or listen to us do a presentation at some of these conferences that we've been to, we always talk about how socialism doesn't show up the same way throughout history. So back in the Soviet Union times, you had the government literally owned the means of production. The government owned the factories. They got to control what got made and where it got sent out. Fast forward to the 70s in Sweden, they had wage earners funds, which was kind of a backdoor to socialism to try to make these privately held companies shift them into being collectively owned. So then going forward, we know that socialism isn't going to show up in those same ways that they have in the past. There's got to be this new system that we're looking out for. How are they going to actually impose socialism in the 21st century? So when this Great Reset stuff started kind of across our radar, we're like, all right, we should look into this. And the more we looked into it and the more pieces we started to put together, it's like, this is it. This is the plan for 21st century socialism. So, Justin, I don't know which direction you want to go into. Should we get into like ESG scores or anything like that? Where do you want to go with this?
So I think before we go any further, we should we should highlight some of the quotes from this story.
Oh, sure.
Let's just point out a couple of the quotes, because it's one thing for us to say these things. It's another thing to hear it in the words of the actual people saying this. So why don't you just read a couple of the quotes here from the story?
All right, so this is good old Prince Charles. It says, "We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this COVID-19 crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change," said Prince Charles. Let's see. What else we got here? Klaus Schwab, Justin's favorite guy. He is the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, says, "The world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions." So, yeah, it just seems like, why not use this as an excuse to change everything? Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Every country from the United States to China must participate, in every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed, Schwab said. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. So to Justin's point, we didn't make up that term. This is their term. They think that it's like this beautiful thing that they've come up with. And when we look at it, it's like, okay, this looks like a nightmare scenario.
Right. And so what they ended up doing, and so the way that they express this, because there's a whole bunch of other people that have crazy quotes. There's people from the International Trade Union Confederation in here saying we need to design policies to align with investment in people and the environment. But above all, the longer term perspective is about what? Rebalancing economies.
Yeah.
And then it talks about we have to put an end to the profit at all costs mentality, because if we don't build an economic future within a sustainable framework in which we are respectful of our planetary boundaries and the need to change our energy and technology systems, then we will not have a living planet for human beings. And it goes on and on and on. There's people from the United Nations, the head of the United Nations, in fact, Greenpeace International is in here. There's speakers from MasterCard, from British Petroleum, the People's Bank of China, the International Monetary Fund, numerous powerful people all coming together, all saying we need a great reset of capitalism. And so what does that mean, though? What does it actually mean? So there's really a couple of different components to it. I think that, that there are, we've done a lot on this. We're going to do a lot more on this in the future, so we're not going to dive into the nitty-gritty details of it. Yeah. But sort of broadly speaking, there are two components. The first is big, gigantic, left-wing socialist type programs that you would normally associate with the left, okay? You've got the Green New Deal. They're all about the Green New Deal. They call for, a lot of these people are European, so they're talking about the European Green New Deal, but that's literally what they call it, the European Green New Deal. There's also, there's basic income programs that they want. There's guaranteed healthcare, government-run healthcare. There are all your standard left-wing programs, okay? Wage increases, all kinds of different stuff. Basically, the Bernie Sanders AOC platform, they're all for that, all right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it then is really the most intricate, detailed, complex part of it, and that is, how do they then take the existing structure of all these big corporations, all these big businesses, all the existing economic structures, how do we make that more focused on the collective? Okay, that's the next big question, because they say that all of these big corporations, they're ruining the planet, they're ruining life for everyone. Income inequality is a huge problem. How do we fix that? That's the second part. That's where they've built this entire framework called ESG standards. It's environment, social, governance standards. And the whole idea behind this is we're going to try to impose collectivist ideals on the market system and take away the normal market forces that exist and
Yes.
replace those with all these government incentives and regulatory frameworks and all this other stuff to force businesses to do the things we want, because they won't do it just on their own, or because of market forces, or because customers want it, or because owners of businesses want it. So we're going to impose it, and we're going to create this elaborate system to do it. And that's what ESG standards are.
Yeah. So like the other thing that I really we need to get across is like just the different like terminology that these people use, right? So the Great Reset is the first one. But the other thing, like if you know that you're listening to some rhetoric coming from the World Economic Forum, if you hear anyone say the words stakeholder capitalism, because that's the one thing that these people want to do. They're not calling it socialism. They want to rebrand their socialism as a subset of capitalism. So they say that they want to shift our current system, which they call shareholder capitalism. That's where, a lot of these companies are owned by private entities, and shift it to stakeholder capitalism, where everybody gets a say in what happens with a corporation and all of that. So how do they get to take in everybody that is affected by a company, the whole collective? That's what Justin is talking about. That's when they bring in this idea of ESG scores and ESG standards, which is basically the elites that are in control of these systems. They get to determine how a company should operate, and whether or not their little social credit score goes up or down, depending on whether or not they meet these standards that they create. And the standards that they can create are basically limitless. So it's, instead of this, they call it profit at all costs, which is just basically companies should do what's best to earn a profit. They need to instead take in all of these different ESG standards into account when they're trying to make their corporate decision making. And it's just like, they try to paint it as this collective, but it's the global elites that are determining what's best for the society. It's a 21st century collectivism.
It's a 21st century brand of collectivism. And really, that's why we believe it's so socialistic. They call it capitalism because it's a different kind of capitalism, they say. It's totally unlike the existing kind of capitalism. So much so that we have to push the reset button on capitalism, and we have to start all over and blow this capitalist system we have up now. That should be a big red flag for you, that this isn't really capitalism. If we have to push the reset button on it and blow it up and replace it, then it's probably not the same as the thing that they want to blow up, right? Yeah. That's the whole point. It's not really capitalism. At best, it's some sort of highly progressive, command and control type system ruled by elites, or it's some kind of socialism. It's really like a mix of progressivism and socialism. The reason why we think it's so socialistic and really leans in the direction of actually being socialism is because how are they going to incentivize businesses to make these decisions? Mm-hmm. That's really the big key. How are they going to do it? They're going to do it by pumping tons of money into the system to reward businesses. Because remember, you're requiring businesses to do things that are actually bad for their bottom line, right? You're saying, we want you to be green at all costs, regardless of how bad that is for your business. Right. All right. Well, their business is going to do that on their own, right? So how do you get them to do that? And how do you get them to be on board? Why are there so many CEOs of big companies saying, I want a great reset too? Because the way they're going to reward you for doing this is by pumping lots of money into your part of the economy or into your business specifically, so that it makes up for the fact that you're making decisions that you otherwise would never make. That's the whole idea. And they're building whole stock exchanges around, or they want to reform the existing stock exchanges around this concept, so that the businesses that you invest in are only the businesses that are green. They're only the businesses that are engaged in whatever the collective decides to be good practices. They have funds, ESG funds, that only include corporations, that follow certain guidelines that that these elites have decided are, good for the collective. Again, so they're going to print lots of money, and they're going to funnel the money into the industries and businesses that they like, and they're going to tax and regulate the businesses and industries they don't like, and thereby make the businesses they like the only option for the consumer, because the consumer is right now voluntarily choosing, using their free will, they're choosing products and they're choosing services that the elites have decided is not good for the collective.
Right.
So we've got to stop them from doing that. And the only way to do that is to make the businesses that you would, in industries you normally would not choose voluntarily, more appealing. And the only way to do that is to pump tons of money into those industries and businesses. And the easiest way for people to conceptualize this is really with the whole green energy thing versus fossil fuels, right? What does the left want to do? They want to tax and regulate the heck out of all the fossil fuel industries because they think those are bad industries. And then they want to pump tons and tons and tons of money, trillions of dollars into the so-called green industries, which are not really green industries, but they want to pump tons of that into wind and solar so that those become more appealing options. And so that the consumer doesn't care anymore because they're like, well, if they cost the same thing, or if wind and solar is cheaper, then great, I'll go with that. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take the normal market forces out of the equation by pumping tons of money into those parts of the economy and those businesses that they like, and punishing the parts of the economy that they don't like.
So, Justin, how does something like this happen? Because it's not like there's going to be some type of piece of legislation that comes through Congress that, President Trump is going to sign or anything like that. So there was an article on here, and I think we've talked about it before on one of these segments, where Joe Biden was talking about the Build Back Better plan. So, I bring that up because that is like direct language from the World Economic Forum. So how does a system like this get into place? I mean, even when you've got like Joe Biden, who could potentially become the next president, already parroting some of the stuff that the World Economic Forum is talking about.
I think that I think it depends on where you are. I think it's already started to come into place in places in Europe. They've already started to move towards this model. There are a lot of different ways that this could come about, but here in the United States, I mean, I think the Green New Deal is a big step in this direction, right? Now, obviously with Donald Trump in place, as president, if he wins in the upcoming election, it's going to be harder for this to come into place here in the United States. It's probably not possible for it to come into the United States while he's president, because it is going to require big legislative changes. It is going to require, some big regulatory changes, especially. It's going to require a massive amount of government spending and Green New Deal type legislation, and you're not going to see that here in the U.S. It's going to require international treaties, and that's the president is the primary person involved in that. So this is going to require a Joe Biden presidency, plus probably the Senate controlled by Democrats. But that's a possibility. That could actually happen. I mean, we're really not that far off. And even if Donald Trump wins, I mean, Republicans are not going to win forever. They're eventually going to lose. It wasn't that long ago that Barack Obama was president and Congress was completely controlled by Democrats. That was in 2009, 2010. So, that was 10 years ago. That's going to happen again eventually. And when it does, this is the kind of model that they're going to try to adopt. Yeah. And they're going to do it not just here. They're already doing it in Europe. They're going to try to do this on a global scale. They're going to try to build trade agreements around this same concept, because ultimately they understand that once you get these frameworks in place, it becomes very hard to tear them down. And that's why we still have ethanol in people's cars. Why the heck do we have that? It's stupid. It doesn't even make sense. Even the left agrees that ethanol is not good for the environment. It doesn't help with CO2. It's a terrible thing, but we still have it. Right. We're still putting it in our cars. Why? Because it's impossible to get rid of these things once they're in place. Very hard to do.
So I will say, I'll tease something just, to all of our constant viewers here, that we have some big things set up for this concept of the Great Reset. So definitely stay focused to everything stopping socialism when it comes to the Great Reset. Like I said, we've got some big things in the works, but we can't really say anything too much about that specifically now. But Justin, before we sign off for this, is there any other last bits you want to get in there about the Great Reset for this little episode here?
I will say this. We didn't talk too much about the COVID angle of it, but there is a very strong COVID angle on this. COVID is sort of the test run for all of this. That's something we will have to get into another time. There's a modern monetary theory angle to all of this that explains how they're going to print all this money and pump it into the economy. It makes it much, much easier for them to control it. For those of you who've listened and watched our other videos and podcasts and stuff, you know how important we think modern monetary theory is. That's a big part of it too. George Soros has his hands all over this. He loves the World Economic Forum. He hosts a big dinner party there every year. If you happen to be in Davos and are a billionaire or whatever, you can be invited to the party.
A billionaire not named Trump.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of different components and pieces to this. The ESG standards alone is very complex. There's so much to it, and it's really, really, really important to understand, because this is how socialism occurs in the United States. They are not going to come and confiscate your property. It's not in the vast majority of cases, because it is just politically too difficult to do, especially with 24/7 media and it's just not, you can't have the same kind of authoritarian socialism that you could in the good old days, when you could just, march people out to the countryside and take all their property from them and mass murder people. You can't do that anymore. It's got to be, you got to be smoother and trickier about it. And that's what this is. It's a really crafty way of controlling things on behalf of the collective. The global elite seizing control over everything, without people realizing that it's happening. Yeah. You'll be making decisions every day saying, I'm going to buy this product over here because it's cheaper. And you won't even realize that you're making that choice because some elitist somewhere on the other side of the planet decided that that's the product they wanted you to buy. Yeah. Everything's going to be controlled in that way, and you won't even necessarily know it. It's so incredible. It's so important to understand. And so stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot more about that in the months and possibly even years to come.
Yeah, we're going to be doing more videos. So if you want to see more videos like this, go to our YouTube channel, Stopping Socialism TV. You can find a whole lot of content, especially stuff on the Great Reset here on stoppingsocialism.com. You could also find a lot of our content on social media across the web. Facebook, Stopping Socialism. We also have an Instagram account. We have a socialist Twitter account. And we even have a Parler account. Justin, where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Justin T. Haskins.
Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next time.